This is the fourth part of the world exclusive Khoodeelaar campaign Diagnosis of Fleet Street British media, and that includes the printed media as well as the contextual background television and broadcast media, and of Private Eye, because Private Eye has got a page or a section called Street of Shame, which it is supposedly running to shed light on the lies and corruption of Fleet Street. But it doesn't. It doesn't come anywhere near what we have been doing or what we do. And we have already referred to the latest fortnightly edition of Private Eye running a kind of correction or corrector to the Times newspaper. Not in this edition, today's edition, but the Times newspaper. This is what the Times newspaper front page looks like. The masthead there, the masthead. There is the masthead. Had published a pack of lies for dirty digger Rupert Murdoch in the obituary piece written about Harold Evans, who was the editor of the Sunday Times for longer and then the Times. The history of the dispute between Harold Evans and Dirty Digger Murdoch is longer than we can do in one edition, but we shall be doing in parts. And this is about the sacking of Evans by Murdoch and the reasons for the sacking. Evans, of course, upset Rupert Murdoch and upset him so much that in the obituary, Murdoch is taking revenge on Evans because Evans appeared before the Levison inquiry and gave quite extensive details of the misconduct and lying and dishonesty indulged in and practiced by Murdoch through the Times newspaper. For those who are new to this discussion, which is the exclusive, world exclusive discussion, because it brings in all kinds of evidential factors into this. So it's not just confined to the diagnosis of Fleet Street, but it is inclusive of the evidence concerning the misconduct and lying by the Parliament, by broadcast media, including in the last edition we have discussed again, Channel 4 and Channel 4 News. And also we referred to the founding of the Channel 4 as well, the campaign. I was one of the campaigners for a fourth channel, which campaign resulted in the setting up of the Channel 4 in the late 70s. Then it came into operation at the beginning of the 1980s. And as I also said, I had reason to confront Jeremy Isaacs, the chief executive of the Channel 4. And my confrontation with him occurred at an event, a PR event that they had organized, staged at their still headquarters in Charlotte Street, not far from the Tottenham Court Road. And my denunciation of Isaacs and Channel 4 executive bureaucrats at the time, I continued in writing elsewhere, including in the now defunct New Society Weekly. Now, the reason why I fell out, it wasn't me falling out because I never had fallen in with him, but ideologically, analytically, democratically, and as a campaigning perspective, I felt it my right to demand answers from the operatives of the channel that I had campaigned to set up. Not that I was the only one who campaigned, but I was one of the campaigners, let's say. It's because they let down the ideals. And Jeremy Isaacs, who had been already part of the inner kind of operatives in the British establishment kind of media, came across as a liar and a very dishonest and kind of repentant liar. And he showed contempt for those of us who campaigned for a fourth channel. Isaacs behaved as if it was his paternal or maternal or parental property, the Channel 4, and that he was entitled to that post of chief executive. Isaacs did severe damage, and the damage continues to this day. And we shall be having to kind of confront the degeneration of the Channel 4 as part of the duty to uphold the values needed by society to have platforms and media that are accountable and are truthful. I mean, I have referred to Michael Crick as being very kind of evasive. Now, anyone who saw him as the kind of reporter that made a name for himself as hounding and harassing or chasing with a microphone by-election candidates and participants in by-elections would have got a very different impression or formed a very different impression of Michael Crick than the reality of Michael Crick. And I wanted to get the truth about himself on the 23rd of April 2015 in the Strand, just outside the Royal Courts of Justice building complex. And Michael Crick ran away and hid behind the camera and pretended to be talking to other people. It didn't surprise me, but I had to give him the opportunity to become realistic and confront the questions I had for him. That is for the evidence. And on that same day, 23rd of April, 2015, Michael Crick sped his way to Tower Hamlets Town Hall in Mulberry Place, London, E14, and apparently managed to photograph or witness the name of Luther Roman still being shown on the council's furniture, hours after Luther Roman had been declared persona non grata as far as Tower Hamlets Council is concerned, and he was not entitled to be in any public position and public post, according to the ruling issued on that day by Richard Morey, the election commissioner. So that was Michael Crick's little exclusive. But it was completely meaningless because the piece of furniture that had Luther Roman's name still there was going to be removed anyway. And they hadn't come round to removing his name from that particular one because there had been so many to remove, etc., etc. My question, on the other hand, was deeper and far-reaching to Michael Crook. Sorry, Michael Crick. Is it Crick or Crook? I have to correct this. So Michael Crick, one of the kind of celebrated, of course, I mean, he's a mainstreamer and a white person, kind of reporters, investigative reporters, and author of so many books. He's probably the second one after Tom Bauer, who has written so many books about so many current contemporary, quote, names. But it seems to me, from the study of the summary of Michael Crick's contributions, that he's, after all, part of the establishment, although he pretends to be otherwise. And the reason I'm giving that much time and space to Michael Crick is because all of this is unique and exclusive, world exclusive. Probably I shall collect all these and write a series, a published series of books that are overdue about Channel 4, The Guardian, Fleet Street, and the rest of them. Why they matter? Because they exist in business by the claim that they're serving the community or the public with the truth, information. They're not. They are serving as spin peddlers and spewers of spin for the ones in power or in positions of power, and they're serving them. If they weren't serving them, there would have been, by now, in the last 8 months, since the virus kind of officially arrived in Britain. 8 months they have to investigate what was going on, and they haven't done the investigation. As I said, the fact that Private Eye is saying that Murdoch took his revenge against Harold Evans in this kind of discussion they're doing on the lying that the Times actually published, the lies that they published about why there was a disagreement between Murdoch, who just acquired the ownership of the Times in the early 1980s, 1981. Now, the Times and the Sunday Times were owned separately by separate owners. And as I said, that discussion will take, we can wait for another kind of edition for the details of that kind of details to be recorded. But the essential principle-based disagreement was that Evans was right and Murdoch, as always, was wrong. And Murdoch couldn't stop Evans appearing before the Leveson inquiry, because the Leveson inquiry was essentially prompted by the concern about the misconduct by Murdoch's papers, especially the Sun and the News of the World. So one of the things that Murdoch did was to scrap the News of the World. But what has happened after scrapping the News of the World is that Murdoch has not actually apologized for the lies that the News of the World perpetrated or the Sun perpetrated. And the rest of the kind of Fleet Street has left him alone, partly because the likes of the Daily Mirror are guilty of the same kind of spying and phone hacking that the Sun and the News of the World were accused of in the main. And what has happened, the Guardian, which was the one that actually broke the stories that led to others acknowledging the need for investigating what the phone hacking newspapers were doing. But since the ending of the Leveson kind of inquiry, the hot kind of period, the Guardian has got completely silent as far as I can see. And the others are not really talking about Leveson, including Private Eye, which has got a dubious stance about the Leveson inquiry. especially as the private eye appears to be taking the side of the offenders, while at the same time pretending to be curious as to what the Murdoch papers did and what Rebecca kind of did. Rebecca, this person that is overpaid by any standard by Murdoch, and what her secrets are. Because Rebecca Brooks, as she was, has played persistently kind of like the gangster Small. I mean, she has been the woman that has been confided into by a number of British prime ministers. Now, what is her secret? Why did they confide in her so much about what they were doing as government or government in place at the time? And some of the details that came out during the Levison inquiry about communications exchanged between Rebecca Brooks and David Cameron were plainly, absolutely, incredibly embarrassing. And the fact that she was prosecuted and she has never been actually found guilty is another question about the so-called judiciary. Because the evidence against Rebecca Brooks that were coming in the evidence in the presentations before the Levison inquiry contained more than enough grounds against her, especially to find her guilty of wrongdoings, any number of wrongdoings. And yet she has been acquitted, and also she has been given additional millions under the pretext that she is the chief executive of this, that, and the other operations by Murdoch. And none of the papers, including the private eye, contrary to the pretentious claim that it has been investigating her or looking at the evidence, none of them, including private eye, has carried out the real, systematic, rigorous investigation into the misconduct of the Murdoch papers and Murdoch enterprise. And it goes on. And most of the questions that arose before the Levison inquiry have remained unanswered and unpursued. So our diagnosis of Fleet Street covers all of those failures and failings. And we are doing this simultaneously as we are doing the review of the reviewers and the investigators, so-called. And this one, the last paragraph of the private eye piece about the Times lying for Murdoch against Evans reads this. Evans admitted to Levison that he had privately described Murdoch as evil incarnate, the very personification of it. He's had his heart removed long ago, together with all his moral faculties and his human sensibility, unquote. Once again, however, the Times had no space to mention any of this in its former editor's obituary. Of course, the Times was edited by Evans, and they actually targeted him under the cover of publishing his obituary, and they turned the obituary as a platform for Rupert Murdoch to attack the just deceased Harry Evans. So the newspaper of record, is as corrupt, as dishonest as any of the other titles in Fleet Street. And there is a PR piece for the son and father, Brian and his elder son, Williams, on the front page of the Beaverbrook lying paper. And then it is running the desperate kind of reassurance on behalf of Boris Johnson on pages 6 and 7 that pubs could get government bailout. That is to pacify the pubs owners and the pub business that they are scared of losing their business and money if there is a longer lockdown. So that's what that is about. And they've got a central kind of editorial page, a post-editorial piece promoting Williams. That promotion includes another picture of Williams with David Attenborough. And this is the part of the Fleet Street crusade against Meghan Markle and Harry. They are unforgiving of Harry because he married Meghan Markle. And that is where the source of the anger comes from. The Wills was opposed to Harry marrying Meghan Markle. It's not just Wills, it was obvious that Kate was also against Meghan Markle. And that is racist. And Brenda is failing in her duty by colluding with these racists and not stopping this racist kind of segregation. And it seems that there is a kind of selection of all the white women, kind of stars, that they have got together to give Wills the kind of glamour base to beat Harry and Meghan with. And there is absolutely unlimited, unending amount of propaganda for Maureen Lipman. As I said yesterday, Maureen Lipman is the racist who, like Margaret Hodge, started a kind of crusade against Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party. And these are the people that are being celebrated, honored, repeatedly honored, and given damehood and all the other things, instead of being held to account and being kind of denied the platform that they're being given to promote racism and segregation and hostility. And so therefore there is a piece in the I newspaper about this woman called Claire Fox. Now, Claire Fox is one of the anti-Muslim genocide deniers who denied that the Serbs massacred Muslims in Bosnia. And the report that the Serbs are massacring and genociding and putting Muslims in concentration camps were aired in Britain, not by the BBC, but by the ITV news. And Claire Fox's group, at that time, Revolutionary Communist Party or whatever, or Living Marxism, which it became, and now it is called Spiked. These are multiply dubious anti-Muslim racists operating under totally brazenly contradictory platforms. They are Marxists, but they are also deniers of genocide and massacre. They're Marxists, and they're also deniers of the rights of the innocent people who are being murdered and all the rest of it. So the ITV News took whatever the form was, whether it was called RCP, Revolutionary Communist Party, or Living Marxism, for defamation. And they won. The ITV team won the case, in defamation case, against these deniers of genocide of Muslims. The coverage in the last kind of few months about the role of these people has typically, predictably, left out all references to the word Muslim and Bosnia. But that is typically racist of the Fleet Street and the rest of the British media. However, there are references to Claire Fox have included references to the court case, and anyone who wants to know the details can actually follow the references to the court case, and they can find the evidence of the extent of lying and denying and racism and anti-Muslim hatred and hostility in the words of these people. And they turned out, this Claire Fox and others, the genocide deniers, also turned out to be among the main regular grabbers of the platform for Brexiteers and Brexit on the Sky News and on BBC and other mainstream media. That is very significant, because Sky News or the BBC had no duty or reason to give as many of these liars and racists any platforms about Brexit. They had no qualification, no evidence of any factual, fact-based investigation that they might have done or should have done in order to qualify to be given the platforms. And yet they were day in and day out given platforms to opine on the state of the country in relation to Brexit. And it later turned out that almost all of them were racists lined up for membership of the Brexit Party, fronted by Nigel Nasty Farage. So the Sky News and the BBC broke the rules of objectivity and neutrality and rules of kind of objectivity that require that they don't give platforms to party political propagandists and spewers and spin propagandas outlets or personnel. Because the majority who had the platforms on Sky News as newspaper reviewers and so for the completely bogus kind of reason, they appeared to be candidates for the Brexit Party for the very last European election that the British could take part in. That is the extent of stupidity, negligence, and lack of rigor shown by others in the mainstream media in Fleet Street who allowed this to take place despite the knowledge that this was wrong, that they were given these platforms to propagate party political and racist and unlawful and illegal and criminally conceived lies and untruths 7 days a week on mainstream television like Sky. How did that happen? And no newspaper noticed that or pointed it out at the time, nor indeed has any significant kind of comment, let alone news, investigative news, been published by even the Guardian since that election, and since it became quite clear that these were operating under bogus kind of surfaces, and they were actually part of a gang of fascists and illegal and racist kind of operatives. And it also turns out that they also had been connected with Trump's right-wing racist anti-Muslim operations and operatives. And the Guardian hasn't published anything. The Morning Star hasn't published anything. And on the social media, the so-called Corbynistas, who pretend to be kind of against racists and genocide deniers and whatever, they too have not commented on them. Nor has Owen Jones, the infant, the forever infant, has not done that. Not even in his Guardian columns. But then being a Guardian columnist means that he won't do the telling of the truth. So what we have been suffering from in this country is the absence of accountable, truthful, fact-based journalism. There is nothing in any of the papers, including Private Eye, as I said, about the scandal of lying and colluding and complicity. Now, this is the Guardian today with the picture of Allegra Stratton. Anyone joining this or watching this for the first time should know that Allegra Stratton started as a quote journalist at the Guardian. And this piece is written by two of the Guardian's current writers, Heather Stewart and Simon Murphy. And the kind of caption, the headline caption is Face of Number 10, Stratton to host daily TV briefing. Now it's that effectively what is happening with that kind of presentation and the display is that Johnson has recognized that he is a liability and he is a loser of public support. So he's got to present what appears to be a glamour kind of thing. But as I have been saying, this glamour will wear out because the reality of her cruelty and her kind of Darwinist kind of attitude and cruelty will overtake, and she will be found out even in that disguise. So what the Guardian's promotion of Stratton says is that the former ITV journalist, they don't say former Guardian journalist, Allegra Stratton is expected to be announced as the face of Downing Street's new daily televised press briefings. Her appointment follows months of speculation about who would take on the White House-style briefing after Downing Street announced the creation of the role in July. Discussing the new televised briefings at the time, Boris Johnson said, well, they should have said, had said, we do think that people want direct engagement and want stuff from us, and so we are going to have a go at that. I will pop up from time to time, I have no doubt. But this is not direct from us. It's from a spin kind of phase. But Westminster insiders on both sides of the aisle were in rare unanimity yesterday. Stratton is taking on a tough role, awful job, they said. One sympathetic Labour advisor, 39-year-old, currently an advisor to the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, will in effect become a high-profile spokeswoman for the Prime Minister. A senior Tory claimed Johnson had personally asked Stratton more than once to become the public face of his government before she accepted. If she did hesitate, it would be understandable. The role will involve explaining the government's every move as it battles to get to grips with an unprecedented public health emergency. Stratton will be on display as political journalists quiz her about ministers' latest missteps. And she arrives at a moment when the government is besieged by backbenchers skeptical about COVID restrictions and facing fierce criticism over the way they are communicated and all the rest of it. This is absolute rubbish. This spin by the Guardian for Allegra Stratton, she is being already seen as the Mother Teresa by the Guardian. I mean, these liars are presenting her as something she is not. She's not taking on an awful job. She is part of the culture of the gang that has brought the awful situation into being. That is what they should be talking about. They should be talking about her own cruel bent and mentality and cruelty, but they're not. Okay, so this is the only person that currently is associated with the Guardian, and he can sometimes inadvertently, I'm sure, kind of let slip and the truth comes out. He is talking about Robert Jenrick in this column today. John Crace I'm talking about. So he's talking about Robert Jenrick, the cabinet minister at the expense of housing. If honest Bob Jenrick is number 10's mouthpiece, then you know they've lost the plot completely. So let's see what John Crace has to say about Robert Jenrick. A common definition of insanity is repeating the same mistakes and expecting a different result. It also appears to be a guiding principle behind the government policy that Boris Johnson is to think of anything the government is managing to do with even a basic level of competency. Other countries appear able to run an efficient test and trace system. The UK, not so much. Scarcely a day goes by without some cock-up at a private laboratory. This week, it was revealed 16,000 positive results disappeared because of an out-of-date spreadsheet. And yesterday, it was announced that the test and trace had recorded the worst proportion of contacts it has managed to trace. For weeks, if not months now, mayors and council leaders from cities in the north and the Midlands that are under local lockdown have been begging the government to consult them before taking further action, that the rate of infection had risen significantly in their communities. Yet on the very day it was revealed that the rate of infection had risen significantly in 19 of the 20 regions under tough restrictions, the government chose to brief the national media that further measures would be introduced next week without even bothering to tell the people in charge of running those areas, nor giving them a whisper of what financial support, if any, would be on offer for those businesses affected, etc., etc. So this is a summary of what has been actually going on. And John Crace, as I said, is a very rare one on The Guardian that slips out the truth sometimes. And where is he talking about Robert Jenrick? That is what I'm looking for. So what Jenrick, he's not talking about Jenrick so much as the mayors of the various cities affected by the lockdown. Let's see, the last paragraph he's managed to come to actually mention Jenrick. This possibility seemed all the more plausible given its decision to send out the Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick on the morning media round. Now, I know every cabinet minister has to take their turn, and the talent is thinly spread. What he's saying is that the Johnson is fronting a cabinet full of morons with little abilities and skills and intelligence. Now, I know every cabinet minister has to take their turn, and the talent is thinly spread. But with the man who broke lockdown rules to drive 300 miles to his third home to deliver medicines to his parents, you really are scraping the barrel. In some politicians, it's a necessary contrivance to play dumb when faced with a series of tricky questions. For honest Bob, it's the only way he rolls. Time and again, he merely looked blank or went into shutdown. Probably the best place for him and us. That is Robert Jenrick, the minister in the name of housing. Is so stupid that if he doesn't speak, that is good for him and good for society as well. Now, if that is the reality, then as they say, God help us. And there is a lot of other kind of Guardian itsy bitsy pieces, and there is no kind of theme except that there is a rare piece in there on page 11 of The Guardian written by Bikram Dodd. Now, remember, there are two Indians or Indian origin, Hindu kind of related names, Bikram Dodd and Rajiv Sayal. These are the two that frequently appear in The Guardian. But they are not kind of reporting anything original in terms of breaking the mold of racist negligence and indifference in the paper. But they are the token ones, and they give the impression that they are in touch with what is going on in the community. For example, in this one, police officers face inquiry over handcuffing of black athletes. 5 police officers are under disciplinary investigation after they stopped and handcuffed the British athlete Bianca Williams and her partner. the police watchdog has announced. Now, there is nothing in that kind of story about police lacking accountability altogether. I say this because police is the only kind of force in this country or in the state that is exempt from accountability. Why is it important? Because police has got maximum power over the rights of individuals and people in the whole country. So what they do affect fundamental rights of the people. It follows, therefore, that they must be held to account for everything they do, and they're not. Now, this is a huge gap and blank, and there is no sign, there is no squeak from Keir Starmer, and there never was from Jeremy Corbyn. Remember, anyone who still believes in the fantasy that Jeremy Corbyn was some kind of democratic kind of leader must know that he didn't. And he didn't do anything on the housing. He didn't do anything original about the homelessness and the corrupt impunity enjoyed, just as enjoyed by the police, as enjoyed by the employees in the council, as enjoyed by the elected councillors. And Corbyn cannot be seriously thinking that he left a legacy of democracy at all. Because as far as I can see, as far as the evidence shows, Corbyn was kept afloat by the marathon that was being run falsely to keep him afloat. He didn't contribute anything original. And he most certainly didn't contribute anything to counter the lies of the media and the lies that are peddled through the media. And as I said, The Guardian today disgraces itself again by peddling Allegra Stratton in the way that it has done. Now, the Financial Times says EasyJet pleads for help to ride out first annual loss in 25-year history. Remember what I said, the whole kind of the main amount of money under the so-called furlough scheme fronted by the finance minister Rishi Sunak has gone to big business crooks. So why is it even worth a news item that after Richard Branson mounted his $1 billion latest kind of robbery plea, that this company is being considered for bailout, ride out, whatever. This is EasyJet is in 800 million deficit this year. Aviation 6 Sunak support. Hope pinned on next summer. Now, why should there be an 800 million deficit? Because they don't hesitate to fleece the kind of customers, and they don't pay enough money to the public purse, if you like, or public kind of duty, obligation, that is the tax. And the main item on the top of the Financial Times is headed Facing Facts, COVID rates in Europe surge. Now, remember, this is the newspaper that is supposed to be sober and kind of less kind of irresponsible, if you like, and less artificial. So where is the evidence? Why, despite the fact that Europe contains the most quote, advanced countries. And by advanced, they include scientific and administrative and democratic kind of levels of advance compared to the countries in Africa and Asia. And why are they obsessed with Europe? Why don't they say the whole picture about the whole world? And why don't they actually investigate every single country? Or why don't they run copy written by independently active, researching, engaging, inquiring writers and reporters in those countries, every single country in the world? Because every single country has got active, investigative, concerned writers, reporters, and thinkers who could contribute to a really genuinely informative media if the media stopped being so corrupt and racist and obstructive and in denial of the world. The United Nations has been, under this current Secretary General, Anthony Guterres, spinning more kind of copy through the social media than had ever been the case under any of Guterres's predecessors in post. And most of the spin is absolute propaganda by kind of slogan. But essentially, to talk about the 75 years of the United Nations, it is important to also think as to what contribution it could have made to the world being prepared for a pandemic, for a world being rid of ongoing wars and massacres that are going on and have been going on. And the newspapers should have been investigating the United Nations for every single decision it took, and should have been applying the criteria of objective peacemongering, if you like. But there is no evidence, either in today's papers in Britain or in the last week's papers in Britain, about the fact that United Nations exists, let alone the fact that it is 75 years old, let alone the fact that it has singularly the most important potentially role to play still in helping the world, humanity, and the planet, and all the administrations that are failing to serve their people at the hours of need. That is what the Fleet Street is failing and the Financial Times is failing to do. And there is a kind of story that the Financial Times should be doing more of. This is the story about the donations for poor people was allowed to be bet on unacceptable Hrs credit default swaps, whatever those. I mean, we shall read the first paragraph and see if there is an idea emerging in that paragraph. The Vatican invested some donations for the poor in derivatives that bet on the creditworthiness of Hertz, the US car rental company that defaulted on its debts this year, according to documents seen by the Financial Times. Well, what does it say? It said that the Vatican is as corrupt as the next kind of entity, despite the gloss and despite the occasional accidental positive things being said by the current incumbent, the Pope. And the Financial Times has got an editorial lauding the debate between the two candidates for vice president in the USA. And the second editorial of the two He's talking about China tightening the grip on private companies. Now, what is Philip Stevens saying about democracy? He's saying that democracy's greatest threat is self-harm. And he's talking about the UK Secret Intelligence Service. Let's read this one again, because this is a crafty one. The wisest words I have seen this year about the world's advanced democracies came from a spook. Alex Younger, the departing head of the UK's Secret Intelligence Service, warned against overreaction to the efforts of Russia and others to subvert Western societies. Of course, agencies such as his must counter such operations, but the problems do not begin or end in Moscow. Democracy's retreat is a favored narrative of our times. You can see why. Wherever one looks, self-styled strongman leaders are scorning liberal values. The forward march of democracy of the early post-Cold War era has become a retreat. Unabashed authoritarians such as Russia's Vladimir Putin and China's Xi Jinping have been joined by illiberal nationalists in the mold of Turkey's Erdogan and India's Narendra Modi. My goodness, Modi is acknowledged as a fascist after all. But the point is that this is a comment piece in the Financial Times, which takes a kind of wide perspective look at the state of democracy being under attack. But this is not something that they are doing in their journalism. They are not chronicling the attack on democracy and the need for rigorous accountability every day, which is what the narrative of this world exclusive Diagnosis of Fleet Street and the British media is about. And that is what the Financial Times should be practicing in order to stop the further decline of democracy. And this is the one about the newspaper talking about chief medics warning to the north. Intensive care cases in north of England could pass April's peak in the 3 weeks, says Whitty. And again, it is quoting the chief medic. But what are the factors? What are the steps? What are the stages that have been kind of passed in order to reach this crisis and critical point? And that is what is lacking. Every single newspaper is missing that one. They're not telling the truth. They're not giving the information. They're not investigating the actual facts. They are copying spin fed to them and making their own spin, fitting their own kind of in-house style of their so-called newspaper. That's not good enough. That's not helping save lives, and that's not going to stop the virus. And the whole world is caught. By world here meant the Western kind of world, Western countries, has been caught unprepared. And the unpreparedness is led by and aggravated by Donald Trump. And they're not correlating, the newspapers are not connecting Trump's racism, lunacy, and fascism with the fact that he has almost practically disabled society and prevented the protection that could have been and should have been available to those hundreds of thousands of victims of the virus in the USA. And the Daily Mirror is, of course, repeating this theme that comes from the other tabloids, not done Fury. But again, they're not talking about why the North is suffering in the way that it is suffering. What has been missing? What has been withheld? What kind of reasons underlie the lack of preparation to provide the necessary service and support and care? And there is a piece by Andy Barnum, who is the Greater Manchester Metro Mayor. His headline to the piece that he has written, or his byline to him, is, "They are trying to deal with the virus on the cheap and making the North pay the price." Well, exactly. So why have they been starving the North of the resources the North needs to meet the requirements, the needs of the affected people? Clearly, the little Englanders are little south of Englanders. They don't have respect, let alone solidarity, let alone identity with the rest of England, especially the people, brothers and sisters across the North. And yet, there is nothing from Keir Starmer about that. How extraordinary. There is nothing from the likes of the liar, Lisa Nandi, who contributed to the demonization of Jeremy Corbyn and wrongly blamed him for neglecting the North over Brexit, because Corbyn has been a Brexiteer all along. So Nandi is a double liar. And all the others like Nandi, who kind of torpedoed the Corbyn leadership for the benefit of the right and the Brexiteers and the racists and for Johnson, have gone completely quiet about the disaster, the Corbyn disaster that is spread by the Conservatives to destroy the North. Where are they? And there is nothing in the Daily Mirror that connects the things that I have connected here. Of course, Andy Barnum is one of the people that is kind of name recognized, because he was a cabinet minister in the Brown kind of regime. And the Daily Mail is saying, it's a rare piece on page 28, 29, that Theresa May has told Boris Johnson that he has declared war on his own party. This is Theresa May making an appropriate kind of statement there. Now, that is seriously worth considering, because Theresa May could not do anything because Boris Johnson and his gang won't leave her alone, because they wanted her out so that Boris Johnson could become prime minister. That is how crazy these criminals were. And now they're destroying the country. Now, here is the kind of contextual, material reference, not the reference to the contents. Remember, I'm making the difference between contents. Is the piece on page 17 by Jane Fryer. She's talking about £2 million collection of drawings by a leading member of the Bloomsbury set. I have left out one word, erotic, because the comparison is not about the similarity of the contents. The comparison is about the similarity of the materials, the general materials, not the actual contents. If that is possible to understand the difference thereby. Now, the criminals in Brick Lane who operated between July 2012 and October 2012 caused severe losses to archives, written, audio, video, and other forms and manuscripts, which are at the center of the claim by our campaign and by myself that they've caused damages that exceed. Remember, anyone watching this for the first time, remember this is a running theme and this is the central theme. Equivalent damages that exceed the combined known reported wealth of the 4 billionaires, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and Jeff Bezos. And the reason why they exceed the damages, exceed the combined known wealth of these four persons is because of the value of the contents in relation to the benefit to the whole of humanity and to the planet. That is what was contained in there. Think about that. So, the criminals that I name, I don't call them criminals because I haven't got access to the wider vocabulary, because criminals is the least I can say, call them, describe them as, because of the evidence of their behavior. And the criminals include the London boroughs of Tower Hamlets and Newham, and the criminals include various personnel making the decisions in the court system, various solicitors, rearranged soul cheaters because of the conduct. And I'll come to one soul cheater as an illustration of what I mean in a few minutes. Now, in the Daily Mail, quite apart from that piece, which is a reference to our ongoing theme of what happened in Brick Lane in 2012. And the Daily Mail is now saying that to send COVID packing, listen to all experts. And now they're saying that Boris and Co. must listen to Jamie. Jamie the food entrepreneur, who has conned more people than can be counted. And the Daily Mail is confessing fury over pubs crisis, dodgy data. And there is another one, the Nadine Dorries is warning of beds crisis, but two-thirds of NHS trusts take in no more than one COVID patient per day. And then there is this item on page 6. Average age of COVID death 82.4. Average age of non-COVID deaths 81.5. For the first time, Tartling proved that most COVID victims outlive normal life expectancy, as calculated by Oxford University prestigious Center for Foreign Evidence-Based Medicine.